I'm Dries. Let's see. Well, in the context of this Q&A, I guess I co-founded the Drupal Association. I've actually been the chair for a while, but now I'm a regular board member, and Audra is the chair. So maybe that's a relevant. I mean, I think people know that, but maybe not. But it's good to know. You should know. And so, yeah, happy to be on the board. I'll pass it on to Batty.
Thank you. I'm the Icelandic person in the board. So I'm I'm also the treasurer of the Drupal Association, which means that I oversee all the financial things that, of course, is being maintained and managed by the staff of the DA. But as a board member, that's my duty. Apart from just being like a good Drupal citizen and have fun making Drupal become better every day. I just finished my talk, so I just jumped over to here. I'm still like breathing. But maybe I will then just put it over to Heather, who had this fabulous pre-note today. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. And I've got daylight coming in finally. This is very exciting. No, it was fun. And my son was so funny because those of you that saw that he dressed up as Ted Lasso with his Drupalcon and was very excited to participate. And before he left for school today is already asking me, like, what's the Twitter buzz? Has there been a reaction? Are there likes? So I've created a monster. But he did go to school today. He was so excited. He went to school in his Drupal sweatshirt that we bought online at the Drupal swag shop. But yeah, so he's repping Drupal hard today and is excited. So I'm Heather Rocker, Executive Director for the Drupal Association. So I'm one of the folks here today representing the staff side, although I spend a heck of a lot of time with the board. So I kind of go back and forth, but officially on the staff. And I joined in 2019. And depending on the topic, it either feels like yesterday or 2 decades ago. And I'm thrilled to be here with everybody. And with that, I will give it to Tim.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Lennon, Hestenet on Drupal.org, CTO of the Drupal Association. So you probably saw my update as part of the Dries notes when it comes to the tools that the Drupal Association engineering team builds to help the community build Drupal. I'm the person to talk to. So I'm very thrilled to talk to any of you about your ideas for ways that we can enable contribution, reduce friction, bring in new contributors, all of those things. I'm seeing at least one question along those lines, so I'm excited to get to that. And then lastly, I'll hand it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Tim. So I'm Rachel Lawson. I'm staff. I'm not on the board. I'm the community liaison. I work with people all across the community in lots of different places, trying to move things forward on contribution, how we ensure people know where to find things, and help people to take those steps and start doing new things. So when we were talking in the Dries Q&A about starting to organize an event, sometimes people just need that little bit of encouragement, and I spend a little bit of time doing just that. I'm also losing my voice.
Maybe I'll read the question because I know Audra had one she was going to answer. That was our first one that came in, so maybe I'll read it out.
Before we do anything else, I just want to say if Pedro does join us, I'll kind of briefly mention who he is. So he is our one of our community elected board members on the board. He joined us last year. He won the election last year and been on the board for almost a year now. Based in Spain, and I believe is on the advisory committee for DrupalCon Europe. So anyway, if he joins, then you all know who he is. So, okay, right. So Tim, did you want to?
Yeah, so the first question we got was just how many members are there of the board and where are they located? And I know we can't go every individual member, but can you give a picture of all of that?
Yeah, so I can answer that quickly. So we have, by our bylaws, I think we need to have a minimum, I think, of 11 board members, our maximum of 15. We currently have 13, and 2 of those are always come in through the community elections, and they're on 2-year terms. and alternating years. So Pedro was elected last year. Leslie Glenn was elected the year before that. And we will be getting a new board member through that election process by the end of this month. And then the others are appointed through a nominations committee, and we are based all around the world. So I'm based in the UK. Batty's in Germany. We've got a board member in India. We've got board member in Australia. We've got a couple of folks in the US and a couple more in Europe. So we're kind of based everywhere, and we try. So I think there's another question around, kind of diversity and things like that. And what we try to do from a nominating perspective is really look for a good balance of representation. So in terms of skills, geographic location, having a good representation of different backgrounds, racial diversity, and also gender equity. We're trying to, I guess, try to have as representative a board as possible that reflects the community.
So maybe
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe to add to that. So how we work as a board, we have committees, and the committees are, for example, the nomination committee that actually looks at these things that the question relates to. Then we also have the finance committee, we have a strategy committee, we have a community committee, governance. And what we normally do is also to look at skills that people have that they can actually serve in one of those committees. So one of the skills that were needed for next year was, for example, somebody who's interested in finance. I'm myself very interested in finance, and I think but to be able to crunch numbers and look at the things together with the Drupal Association staff to create budget for next year, you have to have passion for, and you have to know how that works. So if you have that skill, for example, and you want to be part of the Drupal Association board, that's a very valuable skill, and that's something that we need every year. But we don't only look at that. There's always are we representing the community per se? Are we having end users? Are we having people from the government and higher ed? Are we having those from individual contributors? Are we having people from agencies? So I can go on forever, but there are a lot of things. We have this nice Excel sheet where we also make sure that we just tick all these boxes, that we make sure that we have as diverse and good board that we can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say maybe one other thing I can add, if we actually have a page, I know this sounds funny, but if you Google Drupal Association Board of Directors, you will end up on a page that has all of the board members, and you can see obviously their names, their roles, what committees they're on. And for each board member, we actually have a little bio, so you can read a little bit about their background, and we can potentially distill from that what kind of unique skill sets they bring to the board. So it's a great question, and the answers are great, but if you're interested in more, I think that might be a good page to check out.
Absolutely. Awesome. I'm going to grab the next most upvoted question here, which is about DrupalCon, both contribution experiences and virtual experiences. So I'm going to alter this question slightly. It comes from Ofer Shawl, who brought us DrupalPod and a lot of other good tools. The question is, are there plans for improvements to DrupalCon virtual experiences, to DrupalCon virtual experiences and Drupal contribution virtual experiences, and how can he and presumably the rest of the community help? And let me alter that question slightly to say, how are we envisioning this transition, maybe not back to normalcy, but from all virtual to this virtual and in person, and probably a mix of things going on, and kind of how is that going to evolve as time goes on? And maybe I'll direct first to Heather and let others jump in as well.
I have thoughts and feelings on this subject, as you know, Tim. So, when we were forced to make the pivot to virtual because of global circumstances, we did what we could at the time, and obviously things have grown and evolved past that. I think that now that we are seeing the opportunity and the vision to be able to come back together in person, I have a very strong conviction that we can't completely lose the virtual component. Now, it may not be a virtual DrupalCon like this, but I think it's important for us to be able to connect with people that otherwise would not have access. And we saw that both in 2020 and this year in 2021, where the number of new attendees and the number of diverse attendees and the number of scholarship recipients was just hugely increased compared to what we're able to do from an in-person event over time. And we looked at that data and how it scaled. So what that says to me very concretely is we have to continue virtual opportunities. Do they have to be just like we've been doing? Absolutely not. So my ultimate vision is there are local events happening in person, regional events happening in person, DrupalCons happening in person, but along the way, and not just once a year, there are virtual opportunities for people to connect and grow and contribute. And so I think that we definitely, and then Rachel and I have talked about this, we have to have an online contribution solution because we can't run DrupalCon every day. Dries, you saw there's the DrupalCon contribution spike. What happens when people get in the room? So it's about the virtual opportunity for people to contribute that can't be in the room regardless of COVID. But it's also how do we create more access for people to be in person in smaller ways and maybe have contribution mentors that are joining virtually into those smaller physical spaces so that we're seeing some traction there as well. So I think where I have no appetite to do a true hybrid event over and over where we're trying to do virtual and in person at the same time, it's not been proven effective quite yet for participants, and it will probably drive us mad to try to do it that way. But I think we interweave the physical and the virtual. And yes, I want to do it better. And yes, all of you that have ideas about how to do that and create a better contribution experience, that is an excellent contribution opportunity. And we would love to talk to you about that because that is an ongoing solution that we need. Rachel, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. And in the way that last year we had to rapidly think how we were going to run the main DrupalCon North America, or DrupalCon Global it was called then, wasn't it? We also had to rapidly think how we were going to reimagine contribution at the event. And people like Open Social stepped up and really helped us with that. Building a site where we could have topics or tables and so on. And we kind of cobbled something together. We've got a better version of that this year. Do I think that once we can partly be back in person and also virtual, do we need something even better? Yes, I would be very, very happy to hear ideas on that and things we can do to continually improve that. But also, just because we had a pattern of doing almost like a monolithic, we had 2 DrupalCons a year and they were kind of the same thing, just repeated in different locations. Why does it have to be like that? Why does DrupalCon Europe have to be like DrupalCon North America? Or as we go back to in-person DrupalCon Portland, they don't have to be the same. We can innovate in different ways and different ways for different places because they have different needs. Do we also have to have every event taking place just as it did? You know, maybe we could have a DrupalCon themed, purely virtual event and a real DrupalCon, you know?
I would just to add to what Heather and Rachel have been talking about, you know, do we have plans? I mean, I would say that a lot of the stuff that we're trying to accomplish are kind of in support of contribution in general, both virtual and in person. And so, you know, things like all the things to make contribution easier and, you know, for especially for people who are kind of contributing for the first time. I mean, a lot of that is to help drive that, but also things like the mentoring summit that was put on recently to kind of make sure that there are people within the, you know, there are more people within the community who can help with mentoring, which we think is really important for things like that. So certainly, you know, I think there's going to be more opportunity to contribute through those various things, which will help the contribution experience, whether it's virtual or in person. So,
and just to finally add, I think it's as much about creating that opportunity for one-to-one connection between an existing contributor or mentor and a new contributor whether we do it virtually, whether we do it in person, however we do it, it's that chance to sit down and make that connection and probably eventually friendship with folks in the community that's gotten us where we are today, and finding all the ways and the platforms to do that I think is going to make a huge difference. We've got we've got a variety of some specific program questions. I want to stick with a couple of the more general board questions first, and then dive in there just to use our time wisely. A question from Fran is, how often do you all meet in terms of to do different things like coordinate initiatives, say, or check progress on things, etc.? And I think embedded in that question is, what do you actually meet about, and what's the Drupal Association's involvement in initiatives?
Who wants to take this? Because it sounds like it actually touches on a couple of different types of meetings.
So maybe for the Drupal Association, maybe Dries, you can talk about it from a project perspective, like the initiatives, because I'm not sure, Fran, if your question is around the initiatives that are from the Drupal Association or from the Drupal project. But we in the Drupal Association, we, like as a board, we try to meet at least 4 to 6 times per year. And we try to have other, monthly committee meetings. So every committee tries to meet monthly. And then we, of course, just hang out a lot, and we do our meetings in between and so on. And we check the process of the Drupal Association and the staff, at least in our board meetings, that is at least happening once per quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and all the committees have their own kind of cadence, like the executive committee, ebbs and flows, probably because of me. But sometimes we meet weekly for stretches of time. And then the nominating committee, it's a committee that I'm on as well. It depends. Like if we get closer to the point where we have to nominate candidates, we tend to meet a little bit more frequently. And in the slower periods, maybe we meet once every 2 months or so. Just kind of depends a little bit on what's going on and where, if there's a lot of activity or not.
But I think I think too, if we're talking about the initiatives, Dries, I'd love to hear you kind of give your insight about, how the initiatives weigh in with kind of what the board does or doesn't do, and maybe how the association, how we partner with those things.
Yeah. So for the core initiatives, I call them, you can think of them as the product initiatives, the things that I spoke about in the Dries note, like automated updates and new front end and all these things. We meet frequently. So every initiative has, think of it as a team of people that's involved, and it's loosely organized, like people can join. Every initiative has a Slack channel. It's like actually the first step you should do if you're interested in an initiative is like join the Slack channel, because now you tap into the stream of information. Each initiative has a few, one or more initiative leads. So that you could look that up on Drupal.org, and you could maybe ping the initiative leads. And if you want to help, say, hey, I want to help. And they can most likely will point you to a couple of things where you can help. And then depending on the initiative, they meet, most of them will meet weekly, I would say. But the way they meet can change a little bit. Some do Zooms, others use Google Hangouts, and others just meet on Slack. They don't actually get on a video conference, but they just have kind of Slack meetings at specific hours, which is all good, and people can organize things however they want. And then, we try to build bridges between the Drupal product and the Drupal Association. So very often, and that happens in many ways, like we have strategic sessions where we talk about these things. We try to align work, because very often initiative work also requires the Drupal Association to do certain things. And there's many initiatives right now where that is the case. Think about automated updates. The Drupal Association needs to work on package signing. Obviously GitLab, which is entirely, 99% or more even Drupal Association work. We have the project browser that also requires help from the Drupal Association, because, as I explained, they need to provide data feeds with all the module information. So there's a lot of collaboration, and Tim has been great in joining our meetings. Both the initiative meetings, like he's been in the project browser meetings, for example, but then separately, we also have meetings with Tim and other people on the DA staff with the core committers to align on things there as well. So, there's a lot of kind of collaboration going on, and obviously we meet with the board, and I make the board aware of our strategy. The Drupal Association tries to align their agenda with that, and vice versa. So we just try to, work together.
It might be worth adding that, because not everybody might be aware, but the Drupal Association and the project are are more like a Venn diagram, right? Because there's work that the Drupal Association does that's not code specific, right? Like, so work on the events and putting on things like the mentoring summit and things like that. And then there's obviously project work that's happening that's not done by, it's done by other members of the community, not necessarily the DA engineering staff. So if we think of that as a Venn diagram, where oftentimes it's the engineering team that's in that overlap, but not, there's you can kind of think of it in that way, that we partner together. And as Dries mentions, we align the strategy and the goals of the Drupal Association with what the project is trying to achieve.
I would say together we are the leadership team of Drupal, first of all. And then as a project lead, if you want to map it to a traditional company, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but like you can think of me running product and engineering, and so that's what the community is responsible for, is building the product. And you can think of Heather and the Drupal Association as running sales and marketing and IT. She's like, all these things, right? And so obviously as an organization, you need to have all these things, and they all need to work together well, and they all need to work towards this shared vision and goal. And so I don't know if that's a helpful comparison or not. Maybe for some people it is, for others it might not be, but that's kind of the Venn diagram idea that Audra is explaining. So the product initiatives, they're driven by me with help of the Drupal Association, and then Heather and the DA, they have their own initiatives that she drives, and others are supporting her, right? So
awesome. I'm going to go to one more sort of general question and then get into some of the specifics. So, and actually I'll combine two of these. So the question is, for each person on this group, what is something you learned in your time on the board or time on staff? And I'm going to say something that maybe surprised you or maybe wasn't obvious about Drupal or the community before you joined. And then also, what's your favorite thing about being in that role, in that position on staff or on board? So I'm going to jump in first, just because, I read the question. I want to give folks some time to think. One of the things that I learned, I think, that was pretty astounding to me when I first joined, which was almost 7 years ago, was just how much impact even very small things can have that the Drupal Association staff can accomplish on behalf of the community. Like the quick example was, Dries and I were texting over the course of the last week, and we talked about that. Hey, why don't we have that quick start command on Drupal's download page, right? Instead of just a zip file, and how quickly we can pivot and make these small changes to have a big impact, even though the sort of, I've said it in the past, that sometimes you feel outnumbered as a small nonprofit staff by a huge community. But the flip side is every little thing you do can impact thousands, if not tens of thousands of Drupal developers and end users. And that's just you don't fully realize that scale until you're there and in the middle of it. So that's certainly something I learned. And it's actually also one of my favorite parts about being part of the staff. So that's kind of my answer.
Thanks for doing that.
Let me jump over.
I don't know if you were in the Dries node. You may have been asleep, Tim, because it was at a unholy
No, I
hour.
was.
Oh, you were? Okay. I gave you a
He's been
shout-out
awake
for it.
every day for this. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks.
No,
I
it
was
was
like, should I
awesome.
throw away all my slides? I'm like, oh, I'll just add a slide.
I'll throw it to Rachel next to answer that set of questions, and then we'll do board.
Oh
folks.
God, it's funny actually, because I actually did a presentation on exactly this subject.
Really?
I was invited to a Clojure conference of all things, and I've never even used Clojure, but they asked me to come along, and I did a presentation about 10 things I've learned about open source whilst I've been in my role. And the one that really sticks in my head was one where we constantly hear in open source the phrase, "you don't need permission." And people use it a lot. And it's true. It is true. You don't need permission to just say, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. But what I've learned in this role, spending time working with so many people, is people want to hear that they have permission to go do something, and to hear somebody else say, yes, what you're talking about there, maybe it's starting a new Drupal camp or organizing Drupal Dev Days, or bringing forward a way of doing a virtual contribution, and giving that. People want to hear that their commitment to get something to a certain stage is interesting and wanted and worth taking those first few steps. So that's what I've learned. I spend loads of time, not that I'm in a position to give permission, kind of going, yeah, go do this, go do that. It's brilliant. I love it, because people want to hear it.
Yeah.
Can I go next?
Really
Because
yeah, of course you can go
I
next.
have something that I think goes well after what Rachel said, because I've learned a lot of things. I can probably talk about this question for 3 days. I can fill a DrupalCon with this question. But one of the things that I've learned is similar to Rachel, but it's actually inviting people to participate, but in a very personal way. Because there's all these things people can do, but that doesn't mean they actually step in and do it.
Yeah.
And sometimes a simple act of asking is all it takes for somebody to step up and do it. And I've done this so many times. I'll give one example. I can give more examples, but I remember Charlie Chicks, he came to me and he said, this is years and years ago, I think 2006. He says, I think we need a security team. Great idea, because we have one today. And I said, great, would you like to run it? Like, I immediately turned it around and invited him to own it. And he did.
Yeah.
When he started it off and got it off the ground. And it's been running ever since. He no longer runs it today. The same thing, I've done this hundreds of times. And it goes to what Rachel says, right? Like, you don't need permission to start a security team, but I mean, it's kind of a big deal to start one, and people don't feel like they can actually decide to have a security team. And so I think people in leadership roles, and that's many of us, not just me, to be very clear, like, can just kind of invite people to own something, and really special, magic happens when you do.
And maybe if I can take that, because this has probably been most of the, so there are two really big learnings that I have had. First of all, is like to learn that what Dries was explaining, because he has asked me a couple of times where he said like, hey, are you interested in joining this initiative or doing that? And, it's then when you realize that this is actually what he is doing, he is enabling others. And I am learning that then by trying to do that in my company and so on. So like 100%, like all the leadership skills that I have and I've been learning here from Audra, Rachel, Heather, Tim, everybody, Dries here, of course, but also from the financial perspective and like understanding, like, I can only see it from how I am running my company, but then also to see how others are doing and see the input that are coming, being in a board, seeing that the questions that Audra is asking or Leslie is asking or Pedro is asking, I get another view on also like, hey, maybe I can use this type of thing in my company or in my next board position. So I think there's a lot of many different things. And also, Audra, like to the fact of like you were sitting in Europe as well, before I joined the Drupal Association board, I felt very disconnected to the Drupal Association. I still think we can do much better to like connect the Drupal Association more to the European community. But I am actually every day realizing like the work that Rachel is doing. I know Audra, you're in Scotland. We're going and doing a lot here. So there is a lot of things happening, but it is very few people in the Drupal Association who are actually capable of communicating all this work. So there we need to do better. And I think Leslie is leading the community committee, and we're trying to get better in this. So if anybody here listening can help us, or how we can amplify what we are actually doing and what Heather is doing and her team, please let us know, because sometimes we don't know where we should be or where we could be talking about it more.
Yeah. And I can kind of follow up I guess the last person on this particular question. One thing that so I've been involved with Drupal off and on since, I guess, late 2008, 2009, when the organization that I was working with at the time was trying to figure out where we wanted to go with a new CMS. We wanted to go open source, and we found Drupal. So that's what brought me to it. And the thing I think that I've kind of seen over the years that is I guess surprised me from the beginning, but probably because I just didn't have as much exposure to other open source projects, was how advanced the Drupal was in terms of organization and development. And, the fact that we've got, these working groups like the security working group, community working group, that it really advanced, I think, and a real kind of model, a beacon. So that was something that was a bit surprising for me to realize, that not all projects have those things, in the same way, at the same maturity and involvement and participation. So I think it's really exciting to see and be a part of, and kind of be a cheerleader for. But yeah, definitely, like to the last point that you made there, Batty, I mean, something that, I think we're still like kind of looking to continuously improve, right? The way that we, what we develop, and, what we support, and how we amplify, and how we communicate those things. So a few different answers to a few different questions there.
Awesome. And then let's see, did everyone get to go? Heather, I'm not sure if you got to answer this one or not.
I'll go quickly because folks have heard a lot of and from me today already. So I think that the lesson that I've learned, and I'm continue to learning, is that we are wonderfully unique, but not totally different. So when I first started a couple years ago, a lot of the learnings I was being given was, this is different, and this has to be done a certain way, and there's projects, things that have to be completely different than everybody else, and then there's people in different places in the world, and they all need to be different. We have unique qualities, and there are things that make our project special and make all of our community members special. But at the end of the day, there's more that we have in common, both with other open source projects and with other communities and with each other. So Batty, even when we talk about things like, better connecting to other geographies with what we do, I think it is that the core needs of people in different places around the world and what we're doing for Drupal are the same. We just might need to approach them differently. But really what we need most is we need those people to raise their hands and to help be ambassadors as part of making this connection, because I very much want us to be very, very connected around the world. And sometimes it just takes an advocate or ambassador to help give us those warm intros and those connections, and to help us be in the right places to do the things that are needed most. So for anyone that's interested in doing that for where you live, if you think that we could be more connected with the work that we're doing at the Drupal Association, please reach out, because we'd love to be able to help.
Awesome. So we've got about less than 10 minutes, so it's going to be lightning round, and now we're into some of the specific questions. I'm going to try and grab as many different people as possible, and jump around a little bit between the most upvoted questions. But question first from Alexi. This is a technical one about what is the sort of showstoppers between bridging the different kind of chat communities, right? When IRC finally kind of died off or faded away in the background, people moved to a bunch of different places. They moved to Slack, they moved to Rocket Chat, they moved to Matrix, they moved to Telegram. We've had a kind of a balkanization of all the different chat services, and therefore communities in different places. And there's been proposals to bridge these channels back together in different ways. So the answer to this question is kind of technical, so I'll take it. Alexi, I think we've even spoke in person about this. It's been that long. It was back at an in-person European DrupalCon. The main thing that we need to do is get that authentication and SSO piece. And I think you saw in the Drupal.org update during the keynote that that's one of the features that's also critical for the GitLab acceleration project. So it has motivation coming from multiple angles. So, and the association board has designated special funding towards not only GitLab acceleration, but also that specific authentication and single sign-on piece. And that's what's going to enable us to say, hey, you can use a unified identity, therefore we can use it for bridging chat services, therefore wherever you go, you know, you can participate in community. So that I think will be the key that unlocks that door. And I know it's something that I've personally been talking about for years, so I understand that there's some perhaps frustration, or at least people are more and more excited that hopefully it'll finally happen here. So hopefully it's coming soon.
Yeah, I would say if it's my view that unified identity, that being able to say Dries is Dries is Dries no matter where Dries appears, is probably this, for me, the biggest single technical improvement we could make for community growth. I think it's a huge thing because it means other services can then build that none of us here have thought of yet.
Yeah, exactly. This could also be used for camps to use the Drupal.org identity for camp logins, right? Instead of having separate account signups, all sorts of things like that would be unlocked by that possibility. So there's many good reasons to be working on that. The next question here is from Christian. And I think it's a question about product strategy for Drupal, but possibly about marketing strategy for the Drupal Association. So it could be read both ways. So the question I'm going to paraphrase is, how do we feel about industry-specific support systems being added to Drupal? So that might be, hey, there's a system for geolocation because you have very targeted stuff. Maybe we mean things like higher ed specific features or pharmaceutical industry specific features, industry verticals in Drupal, or key feature things. And where do they fall in sort of a roadmap of Drupal as a product and how we market Drupal to those audiences? So maybe Dries, you can take the product question and we can think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't know if I have a great answer. First of all, industry standards, open standards, we obviously welcome those. So standards are usually a good thing. Like, we definitely steer clear of adding, let's say, proprietary standards or, like, you know, one company specific standards. So industry standards, usually that's already great. Whether they belong in core or not, just really depends on the feature. You know, I think we try to keep Drupal core as a platform, you know, relatively industry agnostic, and we try to bring vertical solutions or industry specific solutions to the world through distributions. So the question, I think, in this case is, you know, is this particular feature that you have in mind, is it something that, let's say, you know, 70% of the Drupal users would use? And I'm making up that 70% here, but the point is, would it be applicable to a large amount of Drupal sites, or is it a little bit unique and specialized, and does it maybe don't belong in core, but it's better served as a contributed module? And the way we go about this usually is things start their life in Contrib, and we can actually see it grow and flourish in Contrib, and we can track its how often its adoption, I should say. And usually when things are super widely adopted, like things bubble up to, I don't know, top 50 modules or something in Drupal. Again, I picked 50 kind of somewhat randomly here, but the point again is, like, if it becomes a very common capability, we do consider those capabilities for inclusion in core. So we have a little bit of a Darwinian model, which is quite unique in open source, where things can evolve and grow, and there is an element of sort of survival of the fittest. And if something survives and becomes dominant, I guess, then these become really good candidates for core.
I think Views is one of the most awesome examples of that, or Taxonomy before
Views,
that.
CCK.
Yeah.
Path Auto.
Yeah. Well, it's not in core, but it's a candidate, right? Like that's the idea. So,
Yeah. On the sort of association side, in terms of, I guess, product marketing for Drupal, I know to a limited degree how much we talk about the industry-specific case studies and use cases. Would either Rachel or Heather want to chime in a little bit more about how we think about that?
So I'd love to say the single best place people can go to help with that is Promote Drupal. So there's two ways we can approach this at the Drupal Association. One is we can take a very limited staff, none of which today are product marketing specialists. So we can raise money to hire product marketing specialists, and that would be diverting funds right now. Or we can use the talent and expertise that already exists in our community, because so many people and organizations are already really, really good at being able to market Drupal to their clients and potential clients. And so what's been really lovely is the iteration of Promote Drupal, especially over the past 6 months with Suzanne Durgacheva as the initiative lead. And so there are distinct committees, but it's an open call to anyone who'd like to contribute. So if you have the marketing expertise, or you want to learn more or get involved, or there's something that you'd like to see from a product marketing perspective, you go there. They're working on initiatives. That collective wisdom is really being put into action. So I think we have that combined with the advocacy that we can do at the association level, in conjunction with service provider partners, in conjunction with outreach to enterprise end users. And so I think it's a balance from what we do strictly from the association side, and then also what can be done through Promote Drupal.
Yeah. And this is crucial as we are in a European con, because we speak all very different languages here in
Right.
Europe, at least, and very many others who are attending as well. So if you are and have bandwidth to do that, something like Splash Awards is extremely important for Drupal marketing in the local regions, because we produce case studies and we produce content in our own language by doing these type of events. So it doesn't help me to have information in English on Drupal.org, except it helps me personally because I understand English, but my market not necessarily. So that is, something that we in Europe have always been focusing on a lot, and we are of course making sure that this is also happening within the DA, that we try to make this as much as we can and assist and help, like with Splash Awards event organization, local associations around Europe and around the world.
And we often are recruiting talent to help with translation, so that when good materials are produced, that we can have those translated in as many languages as possible.
Like press releases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I will say that includes English. I mean, I don't think Audra or I would be surprised if I said that Audra and I speak a different language to Tim and Heather, and it almost amusingly so sometimes.
Y'all sure do.
So we literally do. We need to translate and make sure content is not just the words are right, but the cultural references behind things are right too. So the cultural references that Audra and I understand and connect to are different, even though we both use English, between Tim and Heather.
That's why there will always be a community element to doing this really well.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for your questions. We're technically out of time. I want to try and sneak in one more really quickly and maybe ask Dries to speak to it briefly, because it was upvoted. It was a repeat asker. So this is also from Ofer. So very, very quickly, and I know part of the answer to this, how can we bring back the idea of Drupal as an awesome solution for smaller sites or for the site builder audience? And this is part of what was announced in the last DrupalCon, a Dries note, this return to the site builder audience. So Dries, can you speak to why you emphasized that in the last Dries note, and also maybe what impact you think that might have, not just on the users, but on contributors to Drupal, perhaps?
First of all, bonus points, Tim, for remembering my previous Dries night. The previous Dries night was about going back to our roots and focusing on the site builder. And honestly, a lot of the product initiatives, the core initiatives, are really all about that. Project Browser, which we announced 6 months ago, was about making Drupal more accessible for smaller users, if you will. The GitLab acceleration work is a big part of that as well. But then automated updates, something that we've been working on for some time, is really not something that large enterprises are asking for. I mean, in fact, they're probably afraid of it. They're like, they don't want automated updates. They want to do them, whenever they want to do them at their pace with all of their controls and checks. So if you look at the roadmap and the things we're working on, a lot of it is about making Drupal more interesting and more compelling to smaller sites, smaller organizations. And idea is that it allows us to attract more people, and then those people can grow within our community. And guess what? They usually end up working on more enterprisey sites, because the ecosystem tends to like working on large projects, right? So there's kind of like I don't know if it's a funnel, or like we should get people in the door because they build small, simple sites. But as they learn, they move up that ladder that Heather wants to put in place. And once you have that, you end up with the well-known Drupal shops, and they're all pushing for the bigger projects they can do. Usually the more they like them, because it's easier, more lucrative. So anyhow, it's starting to become a not so short answer, but I think we're focused on that right now, and hopefully it will take a while to play out. We have to get these initiatives done. We've got to get them released. Out of the box is another example, and it could take a couple of years. But I'm hopeful that in a few years we'll be like, what, all these initiatives we did, they're starting to have an effect, and we're seeing kind of a renaissance in smaller sites using Drupal.
Yeah, and then new users learning and growing. I think that's a wonderful note to end this on. So thank you very much, everyone, for your questions and for participating. And thank you for everybody who made the time to join and speak with us. We really appreciate all of your support. It makes everything we do possible. And Audra, please.
I just wanted to add one more thing. Is it okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So one thing that we, obviously before we had a pandemic and couldn't meet in person, we used to have public board meetings, I guess, at each of the DrupalCons, right? So twice a year. And one of the impacts that we've had, obviously, from the pandemic is that we haven't had those opportunities in person. And so one of the things that we want to do just to improve communications going forward is to try to have these kind of Q&A sessions a little bit more often, and so our plan is to obviously do these with the DrupalCons, as we have been doing, but we'd also like to introduce a couple more dates into the calendar a year, so that we're doing for a year or more if there's demand, if there's interest. So I want to put the call out to people that if you have an event, we did something like this at Drupal Jam, I think last year. So if you've got an event where you'd like to include a Q&A session like this, we would be very, very interested to hear from you, because we'd like to know when it would be good for us to have these again, and make sure that we've got an audience. So and then if you've got any suggestions around that, please do get in touch. And also if you've got any questions, any more questions for the board or for the staff, then please do reach out to us. If maybe you were too shy to ask your question today or something, please do reach out, because we would like to hear from you.
Thanks all. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your DrupalCon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.